Coming up on our newscast, President Park Geun-hye has reminded lawmakers that they need to focus once and for all on labor and pension reforms for public servants as well as fighting corruption. Korea condemned Japan's push to register facilities from the country's Meiji government as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. According to Korea, these places are living proof of Japan's wartime atrocities where Koreans were forced into hard labor. And Statistics Korea says production across all industries went up in February, the fastest monthly jump in almost 4 years. We have these and more coming up, so stay with us.
It's Tuesday, March 31st here in Seoul. You're watching Early Edition at 6. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. Pension reforms for public servants are at the top of the Korean political agenda this week.
And today, President Park Geun-hye stressed the necessity of pension reforms during the cabinet meeting.
Meanwhile, both political camps at the assembly failed to reach an agreement to form a working group to negotiate the reforms. Our Park Ji-won starts us off.
Korea's pension plans for public servants have been in deficit since the mid-1990s, and the shortage has been filled by taxes. Speaking at Tuesday's cabinet meeting, President Park Geun-hye called on the National Assembly to urgently address these public servant pension reforms for the future of the country.
국회가 시한 내에 이 연금 개혁을 마무리 짓지 못하면 내년부터는 매일 100억 원씩 연간 3조 7천억 원의 세금이 들어가야 하고.
President Park stressed that these reforms should be carried out in a way that efficiently reduces the government budget, but also demonstrates fairness and sustainability to Koreans. Both political parties previously agreed to pass the reform plan at the full assembly on May 2nd. However, on Tuesday, they failed to form a working group for negotiations on the reforms.
The main opposition has been saying that they have strengths in economic affairs. But I'd like to ask them how they can say such things when they drag on and oppose the pension reforms.
It is unacceptable that the government tries to get through the reforms with the ruling party leading the process, with a limited deadline just like a military operation. The reforms should be proactively led by the government, like labor management negotiations.
Meanwhile, public sector unions said they will not participate in the negotiating table if the May 2nd deadline is upheld. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The U.S. Defense Chief Ashton Carter is due in South Korea next week for talks with the top Korean officials. The agenda is said to be focused on the threat posed by North Korea, but there's still speculation that Carter will want to talk about deploying a controversial U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter is scheduled to visit Seoul for the first time next week for talks with his South Korean counterpart, Han Min-gu. A South Korean government source says Carter will arrive for a 2-day visit starting April 9th. During his talks with Han and President Park Geun-hye, Carter is expected to discuss ways to better deal with North Korean issues and to boost the two countries' military alliance. But the main focus is on whether the deployment to South Korea of a U.S. missile defense system called THAAD will be on the agenda.
Since THAAD is on the hot seat, it looks unlikely it would be formally mentioned, but there's a high possibility it could be discussed informally on the side.
It's an issue that has stirred controversy both at home and abroad, with China and Russia both expressing their strongly opposition to it. Carter is known to be a strong advocate of the THAAD system. During his confirmation hearing in February, he emphasized the need to beef up missile defense, calling North Korea's ballistic missile capabilities a direct threat to the United States and South Korea. Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, who was in Seoul last week, said he had productive discussions with his South Korean counterpart, Park Geun-hye, about building an integrated air and missile defense system in South Korea. Officials in Seoul say that did not come up during their discussion. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Korea's presidential office of Cheongwade plans to bolster the country's ability to deal with cyber attacks by setting up a new cybersecurity control tower inside its National Security Office. Presidential Office spokesman Min Kyung-wook says the move is aimed at strengthening the top office's role in cybersecurity and more effectively responding to situations like the recent cyber attacks on the nation's nuclear power plant operator. The South Korean government has accused North Korea of launching those attacks. Pyongyang has denied responsibility. Earlier this year, President Park Geun-hye appointed Im Jong-in, Dean of the Graduate School of Information Security at Korea University, as her special cyber security advisor.
Korea has slammed Japan for its attempts to list its Meiji industrial facilities as a World Heritage Site. That's because the facilities were the sites where many Koreans were forced to work under Japan's colonial rule in the early 1900s. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Korea has reiterated its opposition to the possible listing of a group of Japanese industrial facilities on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday that the Meiji industrial sites, where tens of thousands of Koreans were forced to work under Japanese rule in the early 1900s, should not be recognized as intangible cultural assets.
To list these facilities, with their painful history of forced labor for Koreans under Japan's colonial rule, as a World Heritage Site does not correspond with the discipline and purpose of UNESCO.
However, there are reports that the International Council on Monuments and Sites, or ICOMOS, said Japan's industrial facilities are qualified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, upping Tokyo's chances. ICOMOS, a non-government advisory body for UNESCO, held 2 rounds of meetings last December and this month to review the applications for new World Heritage listings. For Japan, the 28 sites, mainly located in Kyushu, are proud relics from its Meiji Industrial Revolution. For Korea, they are painful reminders of Japan's colonial rule. The final verdict will be released at the 39th session of the World Heritage Committee in Germany this summer. 21 member countries, including Korea and Japan, will vote on the issue. The sites need at least 2/3 of the votes to be approved. And until then, the foreign ministry here in Seoul says it will continue its efforts to prevent the Japanese sites from receiving UNESCO recognition. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The investigation into the crash of the Germanwings flight in the French Alps continues. German prosecutors are now saying that the co-pilot, who's suspected of deliberately crashing the plane, was treated for suicidal tendencies in the past. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
The German prosecutor confirmed that co-pilot Andreas Lubitz received mental health treatment in the past.
Several years ago, the co-pilot underwent psychotherapy for suicidal tendencies over a long period before receiving his pilot's license. After that, further doctor's visits led to sick notes without suicidal tendencies or aggression mentioned in them.
They haven't found a suicide note, but investigators did discover doctor's notes in Lubitz's home, including one for the day of the crash, which excused him from work. Lufthansa, the parent company of Germanwings, said it wasn't aware of these notes because they're confidential, limited to the doctor and the patient. However, authorities added that they had not found any indication from interviews with witnesses that Lubitz was planning to crash the plane. While the investigation continues, these revelations are raising questions about how much personal health information pilots should disclose to their employers. Meanwhile, DNA strands from 80 of the victims have been found so far. But the head of the forensic team in France says it could take months to identify the victims and that they may not be able to identify everyone.
Fingerprint comparisons made from administrative documents take time because the conditions are bad. The samples and pieces of bodies are not in a condition that will allow an immediate and easy interpretation.
An official memorial service is set for April 17th in Germany's Cologne Cathedral. Germany's president and chancellor will attend the service. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Korea's industrial output rose at the fastest pace in nearly 4 years last month, but the rise came largely from temporary factors, so questions still linger over the pace of recovery. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
February was bullish, with production across all industries in Korea going up by 2.5% from the previous month. That marks a rebound from a 2% drop in January and the biggest monthly hike since March 2011. But when taking a look at the underlying trend of figures, it's not all rosy.
The pickup came from a low base effect in January and a rise in demand thanks to the Lunar New Year holiday that fell in February this year. It's better to average the output growth for the first 2 months, as the holiday sometimes falls in January.
The Finance Ministry also says that the output figure for all of January and February rose a mere 0.1% compared to the fourth quarter last year, pointing to a still fragile recovery momentum. Given that attention is now focused on the March figures, will they back up a solid growth trend or remain sluggish, making it more difficult for economic policymakers to prop up the ailing economy?
Whether the figures for exports, investment, and consumption improve in March will help determine the pace of recovery.
The Finance Ministry, however, expects the trend of low oil prices and the low key rate to benefit the economy, gradually strengthening Korea's recovery momentum. By sector, output in mining and manufacturing went up 2.6% in February from the previous month, thanks to strong demand for automobiles and semiconductors. Service sector output rose 1.6%, while retail sales spiked nearly 3%. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
April is expected to be a crucial time for the Korean economy. Major reforms to the civil pension system and the minimum wage have been on the negotiating table for months, with time running out to gain momentum for a full-fledged economic recovery. Our Son Jung-in has more.
The government is aiming to pull the nation out of the sluggish economy through structural reform in 4 major areas: the public sector, labor, finance, and education, while boosting domestic consumption to revive the economy. However, in April, policymakers will have to come to agreement on the process of reforming the civil servant pension system and on ways to revamp the overall labor market structure. A full-fledged negotiation on minimum wage is also set for next month, amid pressure from the government to raise the salary to increase overall household income. Deputy Prime Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has repeatedly stressed that April is a critical time for accomplishing the reforms. He promised tangible results by the end of the month. It won't be easy. Structural reform itself is a complicated task. It gets even more challenging when the administration, lawmakers, and unions can't find common ground. Questions also remain about whether the National Assembly will be able to pass 9 pending bills on economic revitalization during a month-long provisional session set to begin April 7th. With economic uncertainties still lingering, insiders say the Korean economic landscape will be shaped by the outcome of these structural reform efforts over the next month. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Korea's February household loans rose at the fastest rate in 13 years as more people filed for mortgage loans to buy houses on the back of the record low key interest rate of 1.75%. The Financial Supervisory Service said Tuesday that household loans gained $3 billion in February to $470 billion, marking the biggest jump for the month since 2002. Korea's 7 biggest banks said it seems like people looking for housing opted to purchase properties, with the supply for 2-year rents falling way short of demand. With household loans heading for another record figure this year, financial watchdogs said they will closely monitor the soundness of the loans.
Korean tech giants Samsung and LG Group have called a truce, and they agreed to stop all legal disputes among their group affiliates. The decision resolves 5 conflicts, including a battle over an alleged act of vandalism by LG employees. Samsung accused LG of deliberately wrecking its washing machines at the Germany-based IFA or IFA electronics show last September. In response, LG filed a charge against Samsung for technology theft of its organic light-emitting diode technologies. Specific details on how the agreement was reached were not disclosed. But the two conglomerates said they'll avoid lawsuits and settle differences through dialogue in the future. Robots helping household chores are no longer a new concept, but researchers in the U.S. have been busy expanding this idea. So people may soon have a slew of new co-workers who won't have any of the human flaws. Our Lee Ju-young tells us more.
It's not the nurse, but a robot that's handing a surgical scalpel to the doctor. It then passes scissors to the doctor when requested. Until recently, assembly line robots were not able to work alongside people, being that they were often too big, moved too swiftly, and were dangerous for humans to be around. But these so-called collaborative robots are smaller than their predecessors and move in a more controlled and meticulous manner. Experts say they could be utilized in various fields like the medical industry and housekeeping, further expanding the realm of robotics from auto and semiconductors.
Our research is motivated in part by the increasing number of Americans who are elderly or disabled and need assistance in their homes.
With the global market already warming up to the idea of private drones, companies producing these robots are jumping in on the action. And the growing competition and demand is raising expectations of enhanced productivity in the workplace, as the problem-solving skills of humans combine with the strength and endurance of robots. Lee Ju-young, Arirang News.
Korea has been joining the global trend of encouraging smokers to kick the habit. Previously, people were allowed to light up in small-sized shops, but starting this Wednesday, smoking will be banned in all restaurants, coffee places, and shops. Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Smoking will be prohibited in all restaurants, coffee shops, internet rooms, and cafes in Korea starting next month. Those caught violating the rule will be subject to a penalty. The smoker will be charged up to $90, and the proprietor could be fined $1,500. Local authorities say they strengthened the restriction after giving businesses a 3-month grace period this year. Small-sized shops less than 100 square meters in width were initially exempt from the restriction, but are now subject to the rule. Shops are banned from running smoking areas, but smoking booths are still permitted, though customers inside them can't be served food or drinks. And this governmental health initiative seems to be working. The Ministry of Health and Welfare says the number of people enrolled in non-smoking clinics shot up this year. Nearly 262,000 applicants signed up between January and March 20th, 3 times more than the same period last year. But the ministry says it will be 6 months before it can determine if the number of smokers has truly declined. That's when a clinic participant can be classified as a non-smoker. Last year, around 44% of those who enrolled in clinics indicated that they stopped smoking for more than 6 months. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Many Korean senior citizens 65 years or older say they are not living with their children. They also say they are feeling insecure about their finances. Questions are being raised on whether enough governmental measures are in place to take care of the rapidly aging population. But experts point to a deep-rooted custom. Our Shin Se-min has more.
Nearly 15% of the Korean population is in the 65 or older age bracket, a sign that the country is on its path to a senior society. But many of the seniors feel more and more insecure. Korea's welfare ministry said Tuesday that 7 out of 10 Korean seniors are either living by themselves or just with a spouse without the support of their children. The report is based on a 2014 survey conducted by the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs. They spoke to nearly 10,500 seniors. 3 of 10 elderly people are working after retirement, most of them to support daily living costs, causing advocates to wonder if there's enough government support for rapidly growing aged population. But experts say the problem stems from traditional Korean customs.
Unlike many Western countries, most Korean parents support their children through college and even till they get married. So while the parents or the elderly in this case are economically active, they aren't saving as much for their age years, eventually forced to make more even when they're old.
Chung went on to say that government initiatives like broadening the reach of pension programs should be in place to better help the elderly. She added that younger generations should also start saving earlier, giving their parents more opportunity to save up for their senior years. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Well, many people are heading outdoors these days to enjoy spring.
Well, but if you are stuck indoors for some reason, you may consider an exhibition that gives Mother Nature some competition. Our Im Yoon-hee takes us to one such exhibition.
Petals unfurl. A flower opens up into full bloom. Spring is in the air, but it's also in the halls of the Park Geun-hye Gallery. Yes, they're made out of plastic or vinyl, but these flowers are just as beautiful as those found in the great outdoors. The exhibition Flower Power features a work of 9 different artists, each with their own take on the beautiful and the bizarre blossoms found in nature. Although it's just paint on a canvas, these flower paintings are nothing short of extraordinary.
Through the medium of flowers, although it's something everyone is familiar with, people can receive inspiration and even strength.
British artist Mustafa Halusi encourages viewers to see flowers in a new way. His work juxtaposes geometric patterns alongside blooms and fruit.
The reason why I have figurative and abstract in the same painting is a way of describing reality in the 2 different forms of representation, both describing how the world is and how we perceive it.
Whether it's under blue skies or in the halls of this gallery, spring is in the air. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
High levels of fine dust continues to plague Korea.
Well, I hear we have rain in the forecast, so the big question is, will these spring showers offer some relief, right? Our weathercaster Michelle Park may have an answer to that. Our Michelle Park, what do you have for us?
Good evening, guys. Although temperatures were mild, high fine dust levels made it unpleasant to go outside to take in some fresh air. However, rain across the country should clear some of that up. Most regions will be getting up to 5 millimeters, but Jeju Island will see up to 30. Now, currently, dust levels in Seoul stands at 91 micrograms per cubic meter, which is not that bad. And so, Gangwon-do at 105. Now, levels in the southern regions have recovered to normal, while Jeju is looking very clean. So for those of you in the upper regions of the country, make sure to have your mask on at least until the rain comes. Now, most of the rain will fall through the night and into the morning, and another round of precipitation is expected to fall on Thursday through Friday. Now, even with the ongoing rain, the temperatures will stay mild and to see up to 2 to 3 degrees higher than the seasonal average. Now, with that in mind, let's have a look at the readings for tomorrow. So we'll start off the Wednesday morning at 12 and gets up high to 18 degrees in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern regions such as Daegu and Busan will top to 12 and 15 and 16 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 19, Dokdo hits 11, while Mangkeungang is a bit snowing at 6 degrees. That's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Well, that's the end of our newscast. Do have a great start to your day if you're tuning in from different time zones. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Daniel and I will be back at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.